What's up, Taiwan? I'm Rik Glauert with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. Nearly 25,000 people gathered in Taipei on Saturday to rally support to recall Kuomintang legislators. They were also protesting what they see as Chinese attempts to influence Taiwan's government. Our reporter, Cadence Quaranta, was there.
People have gathered here in front of Taipei's presidential office to advocate for the ousting of Kuomintang lawmakers, who they accuse of being close to the Chinese Communist Party, and more generally, protesting China's threats to take Taiwan by force.
如果我们就是台湾人民愿意主动表态出来说，我们就是拒绝这些舔共亲中的立委的话呢，那其实也可以证明说，共产党统战跟什么所谓的两岸一家亲这一套，在台湾是行不通的。
This protester said he did not want to show his face because he has family in China.
我觉得我今天站出来跟党派没有很大的关系，我没有办法忍受我的国家台湾正在被中共的政权侵犯。
The rally comes amid a mass recall movement across Taiwan. Civic groups are scrambling to oust dozens of lawmakers from both the Kuomintang and the ruling Democratic Progressive Party. Some of those groups are here today to collect signatures for their recall petitions.
我们当然希望更多的联署是最好的。那我们目标呢，都是安全目标是达到4万，甚至于我们希望到4万5。
KMT members are calling for a rally of their own next week to advocate for a vote of no confidence in Taiwan President Lai Ching-te, accusing him of using Taiwan's judiciary as a political tool, as 4 local KMT leaders are being investigated for alleged involvement in signature fraud relating to recall campaigns. All this comes as political tensions are high within Taiwan, and especially within its legislature. John Su and Cadence Quaranta for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan President Lai Ching-te and Taipei Mayor Jiang Wan'an both said they wanted social stability in a recent joint public appearance.
最近，台湾面对外在形势的险峻，内部社会也不应该再有太多的风雨与纷扰，一起努力向前，为民谋取最大的福祉。
在咱上山思维长、保娘保庇之下，咱国家会当安全。 社会会当安定，人民会当安居乐业。
Their remarks come amid heightened tensions between their respective political parties. Days earlier, Jiang of the opposition Kuomintang suggested a vote of no confidence against Taiwan's cabinet while attending a KMT rally. The comment came as political friction grew over ongoing investigations involving local KMT party leaders. The temple event was the first public appearance by Jiang and President Lai together since that statement. A visiting United States senator says the US wants peace in the Taiwan Strait.
To that end, the United States will continue to assist Taiwan in its self-defense. There is broad consensus in the US Congress to support Taiwan's self-defense.
Speaking in Taipei, Senator Pete Ricketts said that although there had been a change in administration in the US, there was bipartisan support for Taiwan in Congress. The US is Taiwan's most important backer, providing it with the weapons it needs to counter China. Ricketts' visit comes after China held large-scale military exercises around Taiwan, a country it claims as its territory. China's foreign ministry has slammed a US plan to charge port fees for China-built ships, saying the plan will not revitalize US shipbuilding.
我们敦促美方尊重事实和多边规则，立即停止错误的做法。中方将采取必要的措施，捍卫自身的合法权益。
US President Donald Trump plans to impose fees on Chinese ships to help American shipbuilding compete with China, which dominates the industry. China's foreign ministry called the plan harmful to both sides. It comes as part of a bitter trade war between the US and China. The two countries have been slapping tit-for-tat tariffs on each other's goods, with America's overall tariffs on China now exceeding 145%. 2 decades ago, China built just 5% of the world's marine vessels. Today, it produces the majority of the world's commercial ships. To understand why this challenges the US and how America is trying to compete, our reporter Jeremy Olivia spoke with Matthew Funioli, a senior fellow at the CSIS China Power Project.
So just to get started, we do know that China's shipbuilding capacity has expanded greatly since the turn of the 20th century. What kinds of challenges does this present to the U.S.?
Well, there's really a few different interrelated challenges that it poses. The one that's getting a lot of attention right now in DC is on the economic front. China is over 50% of the market share, and it is just growing and growing and growing, attracting new orders. And that's really pushing other competitors out of the market. Now, the US hasn't been a huge factor in shipbuilding for quite some time. So really that squeeze is on some of our allies that are leaders like South Korea and Japan. But on top of the economic issue, there's really some national security concerns that go along with it as well. China's huge domestic shipbuilding capacity, that's helping to fuel its ongoing naval buildup, so that's a concern for the United States. And the other factor is that the shipyards themselves, most of the big ones, most of the major ones that we're looking at, these are dual-use facilities, meaning that they're producing both commercial ships and military vessels at the same time. And what we're seeing and what we saw in a lot of our research is that foreign capital is actually flowing into these shipyards in a number of different ways, helping to subsidize the cost for China's ongoing military modernization.
So in what ways is the U.S. trying to counter what's happening in China, and has it been effective so far?
Well, there's a lot of momentum for this right now, as you sort of mentioned at the top of things. But it's not really something that's new. During the first Donald Trump administration, he kind of started talking about shipbuilding, specifically looking at icebreakers. There was a lot of momentum during the Biden administration, and now we're seeing even more interest in it now. And there's a few different things that are happening. The U.S. Trade Representative conducted a 301 investigation last year, looking to see whether or not China had used unfair trade practices to gain an upper hand in the industry. And then earlier this year, it came out with some recommendations about how to confront that, looking at things like putting fees on Chinese vessels that dock at U.S. ports. And that's still underway. We're still kind of looking and trying to understand exactly what that, how that might materialize. We also expect there to be an executive order on shipbuilding in the next couple of weeks. And there's also the SHIPS Act, which is another piece of proposed legislation to help revitalize the U.S. shipbuilding industry.
One of the key findings of your recent report is that a fair number of U.S. allies, including Taiwan, are looking to China for a significant amount of their fleets. How is it that these countries became so reliant on China for their shipbuilding needs?
This is a big question, and I think it's similar to the story we've heard a number of different times when it comes to China, right? China's able to mobilize its massive economic strength, put state support behind specific industries, behind specific state-owned champions. And what it does is it squeezes competitors out of the marketplace. And that's really what we've seen over the last 2 decades. If you go back to the early 2000s, China was only 5% of the shipbuilding market. Now it's over 50%. And there's been subsidies been in play, but also they produce ships quickly, they produce ships cheaply, and they produce good ships. And so market factors are really just driving companies to China. But I think we've kind of hit a point now where we can't just let market factors be the only thing we're taking into account when we're looking at this type of engagement with China. We really do have to think about the national security implications as well.
So given that these are commercial vessels, in what way does their construction by China benefit that country's military?
I mean, there's a few different factors to think about when you're looking at commercial and military production. Up front, I do want to clarify that they're not the same thing, right? There's different types of technology, there's different processes, there's different personnel that are involved in them. But what we've seen, and we've observed this through years of satellite imagery analysis at CSIS, is that China has undertaken a comprehensive effort to consolidate at some of its biggest industries, expand those actually out, and blur the lines between commercial and military production. And there are benefits to that, right? It's not a perfect system, but there's benefits to that. A big one is that you help to offset the fixed costs of the shipyards with that foreign capital that you're getting for those commercial purchases. These are massive enterprises. These are huge infrastructure projects. And so if you can have, dry docks and gantry trains and floodable basins, and you're building all of those and expanding all of those, and some of the costs of those are being offset by foreign capital that's flowing in, well, you're making it cheaper to build up your naval assets that are also using those same facilities. There's also a cyclical component of this as well. What we've observed is that when shipyards are getting a tremendous amount of new shipbuilding orders, they'll convert a lot of this capacity over to commercial production. And when there's a lull in that, we see an uptick in a lot of the military production at these facilities. And so there's this blurring that's occurring at these shipyards. And it gives China a lot of different ways in which it can leverage that. It can leverage it for commercial might, it can measure it for military might.
That was Matthew Funiole of the CSIS China Power Project. A historic town in southern Taiwan is remembering the man who saved its cultural treasures almost a year after his death. What started as a one-person campaign has become a movement that's echoed through the region. John Van Trieste has this report.
The lotus blossoms are back as southern Taiwan's gentle winter gives way to the warmth of spring. They've been blooming in this same pond year after year for more than a century. Here at the old Yang family residence in Jiadong, Pingdong County, not much has changed since the 1920s. The feng shui pond still runs with water, intricate stone carvings still adorn the walls, and the complex decorations on the roof, from flowers to elephant heads, show no signs of weathering. It's all lovingly preserved for tour groups to enjoy. But were it not for one man, these fine views would all have fallen into ruin years ago. Zheng Guihai was a doctor, but it's his poetry and his defense of local culture that people best remember him for. It started with a Yang family residence. In 1995, plans to build a road through part of the grounds stirred local resistance. But the protests failed to achieve much. That's when Zheng Guihai stepped in, and what he did set off a chain reaction. Jiadong is one of the towns in this part of southern Taiwan with a big population of Hakka people. These are people with Chinese origins, but with their own distinct language, history, and way of life. Zheng turned saving this one home, the Yang family residence, into a Hakka cause. Groups from out of town joined in. At first, the protests were something of a confusing novelty in this small town.
我记得很多妇女啊，就是老人家就依着那个门边，也好奇到底发生什么事情，因为整个嘉东村大概没有这样办过。
But the pressure campaign worked. The planned road was rerouted, and the building and grounds are still here. More than that, people began to appreciate a local heritage they'd come to overlook. So when the next battle to save an old building came in 2011, people were primed to take action. After 100 years, the two-story shop and home that local people called Zhang's house was collapsing. And with the property being used as bank collateral, repairs were impossible. With a vigorous fundraising campaign, though, Zheng was able to change the right minds. Today, the building looks freshly restored. At the time, Zheng spoke to Taiwan's Hakka TV about his thinking. Zheng Guihai died on the 6th of August, 2024. But he left behind not just verse like this, but a town he'd taught to take pride in itself as a living museum. Others have now taken up the baton. Now, within 1 kilometer, visitors can find 5 carefully protected historic sites. And nearby, an old streetscape has been turned into a cultural space named Poet's Walk in Zheng's honor. In Zhang's house, the building he campaigned for, a small exhibit on Zheng's life runs till June, a reminder of a person who changed his community. Ethan Pan and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, let's take a look at the rare North African lion cubs playing at a zoo in England. I'm Rik Glauert, take care, and we will see you next time.